couple of weeks ago we talked about Angel Season 3 overall, and how it wasn't the best season in the world, but, you know, there are some good episodes from it, and like I do every month, I wanted to talk about some of those standout moments. And the first one is... I've got two from, like, you know, before the season really kicked in with what it wanted to do, and then two from after. I thought it was the most fair way to do it. And they're both kind of very light, and maybe as like a counterpoint to, you know, the darkness that Angel had last year and the whole dealing with Buffy's death situation. I think it was a good idea in some ways, but it did mean that there was some momentum issues. But the first one is, I think, one of my favourites of the whole 5 years, and that's Carpe Noctem, because Rance Howard, who, yes, is a member of that Howard family, you know, does such a great turn here as, you know, this old guy who has the ability to put his body into these young studs and just enjoy them until they wear out, because the magic that's used just drains the life force of the body. But then, of course, he, you know, bungee cords back into his own body, sorted. But it was such a great episode for basically acting chops, really. I think that's the one thing that really... I love episodes like this, and it's why, you know, I loved the whole Buffy Faith switch, because you'll often find that actors will watch each other's performances and figure out the nuances, and figure out how to basically act like the other person, which is very difficult, because if it's a character you've embodied for years... Yeah, Rance Howard probably had it in some ways slightly easier, because he hasn't embodied that character for years, but he still had to watch someone who has. And conversely, Angel's got to play a very different version of himself. He's got to play a human who's just having fun. You know, it's very different. And of course, the awkward scenarios that came up with all of the females, because basically he's just a horn dog, you know, it became a great comedy piece, and it did set up some awkwardness that followed. It's like, no, it really wasn't me. You know, but seeing the, like, Angel running around going, oh, what, I drink blood, I'm a vampire, cool, but ooh, you know, kind of moments, and all of that was great. But seeing sort of Rance Howard basically giving a very convincing David Boreanaz impression as best as he could, you could believe that Angel's spirit was in there, which, like I say, maybe he deserves the better praise, because he's come in as a one-off, and he's learned how David moves, he's learned how David speaks. The cadence is almost always the most important thing if you're doing an impersonation of someone. It's why the whole sort of Shatner joke works, because it's the cadence. Everyone thinks Shatner, you have that stilted speech. You know, it's the cadence. The voice, most people don't do a voice that's anywhere near Bill Shatner, but a lot of people do put those weird sort of stage pauses in. So I really enjoyed this. You know, it gave us an angle, and it was one again where there wasn't a demonic evil. It was just an old guy who got some magic and was basically misusing it. And, you know, it gave us that whole situation of, no, he deserves to be in prison for this. This guy needs to face justice, and if that justice involves him perhaps having a heart attack or something, it's not directly killing him, and so our heroes get off kind of scot-free. The next episode in my list, again, I mentioned in the overview, was Fredless, because since she's come back from Pylea, she's basically made a new cave. Now, the fact that, you know, Angel had been informed that Buffy had died and had to go away, I think sort of impacted her rehabilitation, I suppose, for want of a better word, in a big way. She just didn't know how to be, and the person that had helped her, the person that she was basically idolising, you know, kind of wrongly, wasn't there anymore, and was kind of distant, and, you know, it really put her on the back foot, and she just had to relearn that, you know, she could be a human. Also, as we see a lot of the time, you know, people do get kind of like a, whatever Stockholm Syndrome is for, like, someone who's rescued you, basically. A lot of people do it. They get confused and think that they love their rescuer. but in fact it's just an appreciation. And she gets that. She suffers from that very badly, realistically. And it's hard for her to balance that. But the biggest threat to her well-being is her parents. Now, she plays it off like, like it's something awful, and everyone's like on edge, like, what is wrong with these people? Whilst they seem loving and caring and kind and just want help. But we realise that, at the end of the episode, in a great emotional moment, that she's terrified of her parents because they mean that Pylea really happened.
You can't be them. You're not them because they don't know.
Sweetie, it's Mom and Dad.
Stop saying that. You can't be. Honey, don't you remember us? I was 5 years and so lost, and at night I was all by myself and you weren't there.
That's what's wrong with this. She's terrified because they mean it was real. And you see a lot of this in, people who've, escaped hostage situations and things like that. Their life becomes very strange, and they kind of try and... I mean, the human mind is great at defending itself from trauma. We'll see, we see it in a lot of trauma-related conditions, like PTSD, various personality disorders that can be prompted by emotional distress at a young age. That the brain makes situations up. It puts things in place to shield you. And if those aren't sort of handled very quickly and efficiently, that's where these conditions can really spiral out of control. And that's really what she has here. She has a PTSD. She's had years of her life where she's been hunted. And the only place she felt safe was a cave. And her parents being there meant that was all real, It's a great episode, and like I say, it gives us a love of the Burkles. So it meant that, I suppose, what you could call the companion piece in season 5 really had an emotional impact, as well as sort of Wesley's reaction. The next episode I want to talk about, well, it's more two, which I know is kind of cheating in a way, but they are sort of the two together, which is Quickening and Lullaby. We've had this whole situation with how is Darla pregnant? Vampire babies shouldn't happen. The swimmers don't swim, as far as we know. He's basically dead, so that shouldn't work. But it does, and it's supposedly this, prophesied evil being, potentially something that will change the world. And we've seen this growing thing in Darla where, well, literally, but this growing kind of situation with Darla where she's got that humanity coming through from the child. The child isn't a vampire child, we realise. And she can't deal with the fact that, she's a vampire with a human soul inside of her that isn't the same as Angel. And the sacrifice that she makes in the alley in the rain is just beautiful. Sounds it's a weird sentence, but that sacrifice is a noble one. We've had Darla go from just like the first real vampire we ever saw in Buffy, the series, through to her death and the resurrection and just evil. Got all the backstory of how she's just, she lays waste to things and was rescued from syphilis by the Master and all that kind of stuff. And she has one of the most noble sacrifices of anyone in the entire Buffyverse. And that's beautiful. The reason she does that, the reason she stakes herself and kind of gives birth by default. It's not giving birth, it's not really cesarean, but she leaves Connor behind, you can say, because she knows that as soon as that soul is out of her, she'll want to kill him. And that's beautiful. It's arguably maybe a little nod towards postpartum depression. The idea that when the baby's born, you won't have that chemistry inside of you from the child directly, and that will affect your relationship with it. It's a very interesting idea they've gone with there. If you think about it, it's an extreme version of PPD, and that's a really weird sort of take. That she's in a position where she can save herself from that, and in fact, in her case anyway, it would be much more severe, of course. But I think it's a very interesting nod, and like I say, that sacrifice was beautiful. And you know, when they get to see that this supposed, you know, evil child, this thing that's prophesied to do something to the world, just is a normal baby, it really shakes up. Well, what do we do? You know, and it's where we start to see, you know, again, some of the fun of the season. Angel as a dad comes into play, but it's such a great sort of arc, really, over those 2 episodes. But I did touch on it briefly, and I want to go into it a bit more detail. And the last thing that we're talking about is birthday, because Cordelia has, you know, a brain-shattering vision, kind of literally. Her mind just cannot deal with it. It's such a painful situation that she comes out of her body, and Skip's kind of like, yeah, humans shouldn't have this. You know, we see, you know, the woman from years ago with her head blown out, all that kind of stuff, and you know, the fact that this was meant for demons only. Doyle just technically shouldn't have done it. You know, choosing the nearest body was not the best idea in this situation, but she's given the opportunity to live the life that she came out for. If she'd never met Angel, you know, if he'd have gone left or she'd have gone left, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, they'd never met at that party. And she chooses that life, and she ends up still investigating this whole situation because she's got that niggle from that last vision she had in her mind. It's still there somewhere. It's like, I need to look into this. I'm drawn to this place. And she sees Angel decimated by the visions because he hadn't got emotional support around him. He'd lost a great friend. He'd lost a really good friend, and then had all these visions. But he can't be the one going out and dealing with them and getting them because they're still really painful. He couldn't quite be the hero that he was meant to be. And it was tearing him apart. It was making him just completely crazy. He needed stability in his life, and that stability would have been Cordelia. And she'd have also technically had the visions. But she chooses, she's like, no, I need to have them. And it's like, well, okay, we need to put a little bit of demon in you then, because that's the only way you're going to survive. So from that point on, we had sort of a Cordelia who had those powers. You know, she had that moment where she's just like, oh, this is happening. It's like, how do you know? It's like, I just had a vision right now. You know, and then she's floating at the end. You know, it's such a great development. And of course, it gave us, you know, how the whole situation with the Beast could happen next year, etc. But like I say, this was very much a season of good moments, and those are really the better moments of it. A lot of the rest, you can forget, and it's kind of sad, you know. But like I say, next season is arguably worse, much as I don't want to admit that. But I will cover it because, again, there's moments, and what it lays for the future, again, is rather important. So before I say again too many times, I will leave that there. But I do hope you join me in the future for whatever's coming. So until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and take care.